Hi, and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Audrey George with Audrey George Consulting. I'm excited to introduce you to our co-host today, Jamarius Jennings. Jamarius is a nonprofit professional, a coach, and community leader. And our special guest today is Kendall Mallette. Kendall is an educator, coach, business leader, and a community leader herself. Thanks so much to you both for being here.
Thank you for having
Definitely.
So let's jump right in. And Kendall, if we could start with you, could you share with folks your background? Who are you? What do you do in the world? And how did you get where you are today?
That's not a small question. I will do my best to be concise here. So who am I? I am, and I'm always going to start with this. I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised. I'm very proud of my New York roots because I think that they play into who I have developed into over the years. However, I have not lived there since I was college aged. But having the opportunity to grow up there was great. So born and raised there, educated in New Jersey at a little small school in Princeton, New Jersey. And then I took my first job here 32 years ago after graduation because I wanted to start my foray into corporate America. So spent some time at Leo Burnett Advertising, really learning advertising marketing skills, which is something that really clicked for me. And then I started taking this windy road towards other passions that I knew would, call my name. I just didn't think they would call as quickly as they did. So pretty soon jumped into the wonderful world of nonprofit education. Working, yes, with students, but also really developing my development skills, which, before the term advancement began, we were in development. So I really learned how to become a fundraiser just so I could have a marketable skill, but I didn't love it. But I appreciated the fact that I worked in spaces that gave me direct access to help students, tutoring, mentoring, coaching. And I did that for at least 7 years. And before I started my family, my husband and I met in college. And he too is from the East Coast. He's from Northern New Jersey. We moved out here. Well, I moved out here. He came out here later, started law school, finished law school, and we got married somewhere in the mix of that time. And then, believe it or not, I was home for 17 years raising our four sons. But during that time, I always was doing some consulting work, and always in the educational sector. So constantly pushing myself to continue to be relevant, right, if you will, in that conversation, as far as what the educational scene looked like, particularly in the city of Chicago. And then many moons later, as my children were getting older, I dove back in professionally in the world of education, so that I could, try to be more effective. And because of some of the opportunities that were afforded to me as a young person growing up in New York City, my parents worked really, really hard to send me and my siblings to this, posh, elite New York City prep school because I would be the first one to go to college in my family, and they were sacrificed a lot to set us up and position us, well position us to be able to do that. So I am first gen. It's something else that I'm very proud of. And then, there's been other aspects of my life. My faith very much informs who I am and how I operate in the world. So I've always poured into my relationship with God, but also into the communities, into my church communities, and into my actual, the community where I live. So I think that's it in a nutshell. Pretty much who I am.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Appreciate it. Jamarius, can you do the same? Provide a little deeper introduction, share your background?
Sure. So I'm originally from Chicago. I was born and raised there. I got my degree from Ball State University. And I've been lucky to kind of have my hand in a lot of industries, over the years since I've started my professional career. So I currently work in workforce development as a community partnership manager. I basically serve as a liaison between all the partners that we work with. So it's about 45 or so different organizations that I have the pleasure with communicating with on a weekly basis, helping facilitate different events, different professional business consulting needs that they may have. But over the years, I've going into sports management. I've been in not-for-profit work. I've done coaching within education, but as well as athletic coaching. I've been a basketball coach for the last 5 years, and that's been a really rewarding experience for me as well. And so I've kind of had my hand in different industries, so it gives me different perspectives, different way to look at how different leaders operate, how individuals operate from different facets of within different career fields. Um, and I also serve as a board member on my church as well. So that's an entirely different perspective that's rewarding in a different sense as well. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Jamarius, you brought up learning from different types of leaders. How do you think of leadership? How would you describe leadership?
Yeah, so I think if someone, is striving to be if they're striving to be a good leader, I think a good leader is someone who wants to be someone that they would want to follow, basically, right? So I really define leadership as someone who's resilient, someone who's trusted,
Mhm.
someone who is willing to do the work that they're putting out into the world, right? So for me, being a leader, I never want to require someone else to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So for me, leadership is really in a nutshell, you're the ambassador of your own vision, as a leader. So it's important to exemplify, good traits. It's important to exemplify good character, because at the end of the day, the buck always stops with the leader, and so that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Well said. Kendall, your thoughts. How would you describe leadership? How do you think about that concept and about kind of how you operate as a leader yourself?
Well, in listening to Jamarius describe himself in the initial question, I also realized that I left off pretty significant component of what makes me work, what makes me tick, and that is coaching. I've been coaching for 30 years now, track and field. I had the distinct pleasure of serving as in a leadership position as the captain of the track team at Princeton University a million years ago. And I will say that whether it was in high school, college, and beyond, the opportunities that I have had to lead, I always, not just because, I'm trying to sound humble, I hopefully coming from a place of humility, but like it is a way to serve. And that's actually Princeton's motto is the nation's service. I just did a college fair last night and I'm getting these questions from kids. How do I stand out? How do I make my application stand out? And I was like, your personal statement, because there's a whole pile of kids that have the same grades, scores. Everybody has a million co-curriculars and they're president of all of them. What makes you different, right? How do you jump off the page in your personal statement? And so I think that leadership does just that. Um, there's many different types of leaders, but I believe what really makes people stand out is when you're comfortable in your skin and you're able to tap into what you're passionate about and what you feel you're called to do, your purpose, right? So those two P words for me, passion and purpose, have always driven what I've done, definitely as long as I've been, maybe even in middle school. So as of now, I'm going to be 55 in less than a week. And I look back over my life, there are definitely patterns that I've been able to see. I don't think I knew that they were going to become a pattern for me. Um, but when I'm looking at other people in leadership and seeing the qualities and attributes that I like and that I appreciate and that inspire me, and also the things that I feel like maybe don't exemplify great leadership, the things that I believe keep a good leader strong is one, accountability, right? Like you always have to have your people. Um,
Mm.
and that's typically is a pretty small circle because you got to be able to really let your hair down and also know that you have a circle of trust so that the things that you say when you need to, maybe go there are not going to be released because it is critical. Jamarius said, it's important to think about how you are presenting yourself. So like qualities like operating in integrity, like that's what I tell my own children. I don't care how much or how little money you have, the integrity is something that nobody should be able to take away from you, right? We don't
Right.
have a lot of control in life over what happens in our life and how we respond to it, but your integrity is yours to give away. So don't do it, right? Like protect that thing. So I think that is a quality I definitely always look for in leadership, and folks that are trustworthy. So I think when you do that, then it's easier to establish relationships. I think strong leaders build relationships, right? And that can be relationships between individuals, teams, organizations. You are able to be a bridge builder and develop relationships and connect people. And you're like your own network, if you will. I do believe that that is also a very strong aspect, at least of my leadership style. There are other leadership styles, but that has definitely worked for me.
So I think two of the most important aspects of leadership, right, is just like you said, Kendall, knowing the type of leader that you are. I know you said that every leader isn't the same, but also knowing the individuals that you're leading, right? So I think I would say over the last couple of years or so, I've kind of had to relearn the concept of every leader not being the same. I think, in the past, I may have thought that, hey, all leaders are, it's kind of like one size fits all, right? So when you think about a leader, you think about somebody that's louder. They may, try to command the room with their voice. They come in, they want to be the center of attention. You know what I mean? Kind of that aspect. And over the last couple of years, I've had to kind of retrain my brain to realize, no, it doesn't have to be that way. Just because some leaders are that way, but it's other leaders that are not. It's other leaders that are more reserved, that are more introverted, but they can step in front of a room and give what's needed, and then a lot of leaders recharge in that way. Kind of going in their quiet time and looking over notes and doing different things like that. But yeah, when you brought up every leader isn't the same, it made me think about those two important aspects of knowing the type of leader you are, and but also knowing those that you're leading, because being a good leader, you can't lead everyone the same. That's a lesson that I've learned over the years as well. And so honestly, that's really helped me even to become a better leader, knowing that you can't lead everyone the same, but also kind of being more comfortable in my skin to be able to know, okay, I'm this type of leader, and it's okay to operate in that. I don't have to look like anyone else in their leadership capacity or role. They operate one way. It's okay for me to operate in an entirely different way, but still be just as effective, or maybe even more effective in my leadership style as well. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that for sure.
I think, Kendall, you talked about integrity, you talked about honesty, you talked about accountability, and I think you touched on, but Jamarius just took us deeper there around authenticity, right? And I think that's something that kind of at the time that I was coming up, right, back in the 1900s, folks, right? That wasn't something that would have been talked about or even thought about, or a word we even probably used or heard of, right? I think it was a more cookie cutter mindset, Jamarius, like you were just sharing, like there was a way things were done, right? And I think what we've learned over the years, and I think it has a lot to do with the information sharing age and how much we can see other perspectives and we can see other styles. It's not just what somebody puts in front of us because we have limited exposure. And so I think, Jamarius, you're tapping into what might be really related to what Kendall said around the passion and purpose, right? It really kind of might be all of our superpower, right? To tap into what it is that drives us the most. I've been fortunate to be in jobs that even on my worst days, I loved what I was doing, right? It was who I was to be in those positions. It was, I brought my whole entire self to those roles, and that made all the difference in the world when it came time to thinking of new ideas, when it came time to solving problems. I wasn't trying to like fit in some box and operate in a way that I understood I was supposed to, quote unquote. I was able to kind of do me, right? For lack of a better way to put that. And so I think that's a really important aspect that I think a lot of people lose track of. I think folks, I've done this myself. There is still some part of me at times that I catch, like, I'm trying to fit into what I think people want to see, right? And to kind of be able to set that down. It can be hard, but it's also it's freeing when we can do that. Kendall, how do you approach that? How do you approach showing up as yourself on a daily basis?
I mean, I think it is a daily decision, right? And there are definitely if I'm going to make myself vulnerable for a minute here, there, an aspect of myself that I am very keenly aware of, an area of challenge, sometimes an area of struggle, and definitely was a few decades ago, is battling perfectionism. Like that is
Mm.
definitely something that I have struggled with, as a child. And like when you talked about like growing up in the 70s and 80s, and with an eye towards going to college and being that first one to go to college in my family, just like you're first in, like it was, there was a lot of pressure that was put on me. I also now can look back and say I also put a lot of pressure on myself. So for me to be aware of, maybe depending upon what's happening in my life, professionally, personally, and then particularly during periods of high stress, where I can find myself in these patterns and catch myself, hopefully catch myself to say, okay, you're doing too much here. This is, I mean, you said it to me the other day about parenting, but like there are days when I'm like, the standard that I hold myself to sometimes is not attainable. It is completely unattainable. It is not reasonable. And I have to go, all right, now let's get some perspective. Is this just a good goal, or am I setting the bar way too high? And if that's the case, then I have to right size that thing so that I'm not now chasing something that I'm never going to be able to catch and then getting frustrated. So that's been a huge thing for me, to be able to be very self-aware. I think self-awareness is huge. None of us are perfect, right? So that's the easiest thing I could ever say is nobody's perfect. So even on your worst day, not out of comparison, because I don't believe that people should compare themselves. That is one of the worst pitfalls to fall into as a leader. I do think it's really important to know thyself. And so you're like, hey, this is an area of growth for me. This is one of my strengths. But right now I'm not feeling that thing shine. How do I get myself into a headspace where I can do that?
So I think you're exactly right about self-awareness being key. And I love the way you put like right sizing your own expectations, right? I'm one of those people that used to write a multiple page to-do list for myself every day. And I was like serious. And that like went on for years. And so having to learn that like things take longer than I think they do. And we need to kind of get a little bit more reasonable, because then I would be upset with myself that I didn't finish that list that was unattainable. Right. And so the idea of right sizing, that really resonates. Jamarius, anything kind of that you see yourself needing to adjust and kind of be aware of in your day-to-day work, in your day-to-day development as a rising leader?
Um, yeah, it kind of goes more along the lines of, kind of what I was referring to earlier, just knowing who I am and knowing the power in the type of leader that I am, right? So um, for years and years, I thought that I was an extrovert, and being around people, being in front of people, leading different charges. When I was in high school and coming up, I always kind of view myself as that way. So I tried to, I would say, probably tried to overcompensate knowingly and unknowingly, in a lot of aspects. And so I would do these things, have energy and do this and that. And then I would come home and I would be drained. I would be exhausted. I would feel like I don't have much more to give to anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just need some time just to for silence, right? And so the more that I went and the more that I grew, in my leadership style, I actually realized that I'm the opposite. Um, what I've learned over the last couple of years is I'm much more introverted than what I realized, and operating out of that has made me much more effective, right? In terms of meeting my own needs and meeting my own goals, but also meeting the needs of those that I lead, right? And for me, with that, I think with overcompensating, I think um that can lead to a lot of bad performing, as a leader. Um, but once you realize who you are as a leader, you can be much more effective, much more authentic, much more precise in your methods, right? So I think about the middle school team that I recently coached for basketball. Just with leadership, proximity is important, right? So um leadership is really about getting up close and personal with those that you lead, right? Um, for me, when I think about the coaches that I had, when I was in high school and middle school and elementary school, trust was big for me. Especially when those coaches took on much more of a bigger role for me, knowing how my home life was, right? And so knowing that I kind of always had that in the back of my mind and used that kind of as fuel to be that source, for the kids that I lead now with basketball and beyond. So yeah, so I think it's really important to remain authentic, to hone in on who you truly are, and to be able to ride that wave that way.
And you talked about understanding who it is that you're leading.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more? How do you do that? How do you kind of recognize, right? This is a quote unquote know your audience
Mhm.
mentality, right? How do you figure out who those folks are and what they need from you?
I think, a lot of times it's simple conversations, right? For one, you have to actually care about, what everybody has going on in their life, right? So if I'm coaching, of course, you know, for the most part, you guys are here because you love basketball. We want to win games. You guys want to have fun, all those things. But I care about you as people. I care about what's going on in your home life. I care about what's going on, within your with education. I care about what's going on with you personally. Kind of what makes you tick, because that'll in turn make you a better player, but it'll also make you a better person. It'll make you a better young man or young woman. Um, and so going along those lines, you have to be connected with your people, right? You have to have conversations. You have to know who it is that you have around you, right? Having conversations, having one-on-one meetings with them. When I worked for the Boys and Girls Club for a while, and I had one-on-one meetings with my staff, the first 10 minutes it would be nothing about the job at all. I would ask them, "Hey, what's going on with you personally? Like, how is there anything that I can do to help you, personal? Like, forget about work for a second. Like, what's going on with you?" And so, because of that, I saw they trusted me more. There was more keen to come into my office and close the door and have those type of conversations. And so that fostered that trust and that connection there. So it's really important to get to know your people on a personal level. Because once you get that, once you gain someone's trust, they'll run through a wall for you 10 times out of 10. And so I've always looked for that in those who lead me, but I also try to be there for those who I lead as well. So
I think you bring up some really important points. Kendall, in our work together, we've seen leaders who struggled to kind of get to the truth of what was happening in their organizations, right? Like, kind of research shows us that team members aren't always willing to say outright what they're thinking, what they're happy about, what they're worried about, what they're stressed about, right? They're afraid of kind of undermining you as a leader. They respect you. They've got, they think you know what you're doing and they want to follow you. They don't necessarily agree with it, but maybe that's me, right? Maybe I'm the one that doesn't understand, or they're afraid. They themselves have had a bad circumstance in the past, or they said something to a leader and were somehow punished for that, or they know somebody who had that situation, right? And so kind of really understanding what people are saying, what people aren't saying. One of the things I talk to people about a lot is there are certain situations in which kind of what's unsaid is almost more important than what is said. Because if you ask an important question and you're not really getting a resounding yes, absolutely, 1000%, there are times when anything short of that actually means no. And kind of being able to understand like how to watch for that. And so I really appreciate what you're sharing about the observation, right? You're listening deeply, both of you. You're connecting with folks, you're building that trust. We've talked about trust and the importance of that. We've talked about kind of building a foundation of really, Jamarius, I think what you were talking about earlier goes a lot to belonging, right? Kind of the sense of belonging. People feel connected to, they feel like they belong on your team, which I expect helps them feel like they belong in your organization. And kind of the research shows us that when we feel like we belong, we do perform better, right? You talked about people running through walls for you. You're going to come to work in a very different mindset. You're going to come to practice. You're going to come to that meet or that game in a very different mindset if you feel like you're really part of the team, whatever your team looks like. And so I really appreciate kind of all of these aspects because you are tapping, I think, into some really important nuances of leadership and of leadership communication. Let's pivot for a second. Kendall, if you can think back to when kind of you were a young buck, right? 20 something coming up, like if you could go back and give yourself some advice, if you could tell 24-year-old Kendall something, what would you share?
Oh, that's such a good question. It goes back to what I said before about challenging ourselves to not create expectations that are not reasonable. Honest to God, the average 20 something, particularly that mid 20 something, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. Even when you get to middle age, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. You're a little farther down the line. I think what just happens is one, we're tired, but some things just don't matter anymore. But if you can go back and say, listen, yes, you have goals, you have aspirations, and you should have those things that should help guide you. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to, life is short. I lost my mom when she was 63 years old. Well, now I am 7 years from that. My mother was not sick, right? She was not somebody that was struggling with, a disease or like we knew she was going to die. She just dropped dead. And I firmly believe in the end, yeah, there was after the autopsy, she had heart disease, the silent killer, but stress was definitely, I would say, the driving force behind what took her from this world way too soon. And stress comes in a lot of different forms. Particularly, and I will speak definitely to the experience of being a Black woman in America. I am proud to be both Black and female, but there's tons of studies and statistics that speak to even people that have been fortunate to have the kind of life experiences and educational opportunities that I've had. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You can be a world-class tennis player and still go to the hospital and, have a horrific experience because we just don't get the same kind of treatment when we're having a baby. Um, all those types of things. So I never ever operate, never have, and I never will operate from the lens of being a victim. That is not it. However, I do think you have to understand the world that you live in, right? And in my world, I am learning more and more. There's a lot that we get to control, and there's a lot that we don't get to control. So I would tell my younger self, hey, you got like definitely don't sweat the small stuff, but control what you can. That really does matter. You can control your stress around the stress, right? You can control how you respond to what's happening at work, what's happening in your relationship, in a way that allows you to preserve yourself. My number one rule, which has always been with me, but that I've articulated a lot over the years, particularly to my family, is peace. When we come across the threshold of that door, it's peace. That does not mean your day was perfect. It does not mean things are, everything's going well. It does mean that we get to control the peace of this household to the best of our ability. So don't bring the chaos from outside into this space, right? We got to preserve that thing together because that's what allows us to reset, as Jamarius said earlier. That's what allows us to reset so that when, I'm compartmentalizing and dealing with the next hour, the next day, the next morning of my life, the space that I've created in my home, in my office, afford me the opportunity to hit the reset button because it is a space of peace. So I would encourage young people, do your thing, have fun, but you gotta have spaces of peace. Sometimes that's a physical space, your home, your office. Sometimes that's the people that you're spending time around. Okay, everything can't be chaos. So if you're creating chaos, you need to examine that. But if you're surrounded by chaos, if you can remove yourself from that to some extent, do that, right? Preserve your peace.
So I think the idea of controlling the stress around the stress is something that I'm personally kind of grabbing onto here. I think the idea of acknowledging what we can control and controlling it right? And kind of finding a space to create that peace for ourselves is so important. That's really resonating with me. There are days that I feel like so much of what's happening, in the world, like literally it's so stressful. It's beyond my control. And I can find myself spinning, right? And trying to find ways to create peace, trying to find ways to manage the stress around the stress. I really appreciate that perspective. I also want to say how much I appreciate what you just shared about your experience as a Black woman. And I want to point out, just for any listeners that haven't seen it, the kind of experience that you were alluding to, the experience you were alluding to of a tennis player not having a good hospital experience. There's an amazingly insightful article, a magazine article about Serena Williams, that if you haven't read it, please Google it and take a look. Jamarius, when you think about the impact you want to make on the world, what do you want your leadership legacy to be?
Yeah, honestly, I really want, those who look at me in a certain leadership capacity, to view me as a resource, as a trusted resource for bringing them from one level to the next, right? So professionally, whether I'm training someone, helping them go from one career goal to another, whether I'm providing financial stability in some way,
Mm.
whatever role that I'm in, when it's all said and done, I want to look back on my life and be able to say, okay, you did good. You were able to you were able to squeeze out everything that God put into you to give out to the world. Because I think and believe that everything that God put in you is for others. It's not for you. And so in order for me to maximize that, I have to continue to give. I have to continue to pour.
So I'm going to head us to kind of close out a little bit with these last couple of questions that are for both of you. Kendall, let's start with you on this one. What's the best leadership advice you've received?
I haven't. To be very honest, I have not.
Ooh, say more about that, please.
I mean, one area where I know I have room for growth is in being mentored. I don't feel that I've had ample opportunity for folks to mentor me, and maybe haven't put myself in position for folks to like officially be in a mentoring mentee relationship. It is something that I have desired, and I don't feel like I've experienced that yet. I've had great leaders in my midst. I've had great coaches in my midst my entire life, but sort of that mentor mentee advice where I'm like hanging on that person's every word and watching how their life plays out. I even tried to do that like 4 years ago, and I talked to this woman, and I was like, I think would you mentor me? Like I've never, and she said yes, but I mean our worlds haven't completely crossed paths often. And she's considerably older. She's still working, but she's considerably older than me, and we touch base every now and then. But I don't feel like I've had a leader pouring into me in the way that I should probably. So that's something that I'm still seeking, quite frankly, in my life. I've had people say great things, but I don't. That's a hard one for me to answer, if I'm going to be honest.
Okay. I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that. Jamarius, any leadership advice you've received that's really resonated with you?
Yeah, so this is this is honestly, one that I live by, and it kind of morphs itself to fit kind of any situation that I need, right? So when I was young, a wonderful lady told me to be the exception, not the majority. And I think about that quote maybe every other day.
Mm.
And I see it kind of peeking his head when I need it the most. So, when I think about, let's say if I'm doing a certain task, or if I have something, in front of me that's a bit daunting, that's a big task that may seem much bigger than me, and it may seem like it may take a lot to get through or get past. I hear that, be the exception, not the majority. Be the exception, not the majority. And for me, what that quote says to me is stand out, do your best. Don't take don't take anything lacking as an answer as a result. Like whatever your best is in this, give it no matter what. Don't look like anybody else. Be you. Be authentic. Be yourself. See this thing through. Um, and in every aspect of my life, when I need to kind of have that ring out in my mind the most, it really does help. And that's a quote that my grandmother gave me, when I was young. And it's a quote that I live by, and it truly helps me in many aspects, especially, that as a leader. So, and in different leadership capacities, when I'm doing different things, it pushes me to go that extra mile, into maybe stepping into territory that's unfamiliar for me. If I'm taking on a new leadership role, or if I'm doing something that's unprecedented, or I may haven't done before in the past, that rings out in my mind, and it helps me, get past it. Because I'm not in that position, in that role by accident. God put me there for a reason. So it gives me a lot of confidence. So
Be
So
the exception, not the majority. Thank you. Kendall.
I'm going to piggyback. So I don't have, like I said, a person, but I do have a quote that's right here. I'm looking at it right now. I'm in my office space, and I've only had it for a couple of years now. So I'll read it so that I get it correct. It says, "Only love can truly save the world. So I stay, I fight, and I give for the world that I know can be. This is my mission now, forever." End quote. Wonder Woman. So that came from the Wonder Woman movie. And that's not because I want to be Wonder Woman. Gave that up a long time ago when people would always be like, "Oh my God, you're like a superwoman. You're like Wonder Woman." Yeah, that will kill you, right? Trying to be Wonder Woman. Well, there's a lot of women where that can kill you. Somebody said it to me the other day. I was like, yeah, nope, don't do it. Please. I know you're trying to compliment, but like, I don't want to be Wonder Woman. I don't want that. But that came from the Wonder Woman movie, and I was watching it on a plane. I didn't watch it in the theater. I watched it on the plane, and then I found myself watching that movie over and over and over on the plane. I don't know why it never ever leaves like the airline industry. But then I was like, I got to write that down. It's towards the end of the movie. And it's so powerful to me because it does all the things, right? Like it actually sounds almost like scripture, but it's not. But it comes back to that word love and how to save the world. Well, your mission, right? It's got to be your mission. And how you operate should be cloaked in love. So that is at least, it's advice, but it's not from an actual human being.
Very powerful. Thanks so much to you both for everything that you shared today. Thanks for your honesty. Thanks for your vulnerability. Thanks for being willing to pour into others. Really grateful to both of you. Thanks so much.